this is not a toy. All right, let's just get you buckled in. Okay. All right, it's here. Whoa. And there it is. Tamiya makes really good products, and they range from high-end race cars to toys to what I like to call hobby grade toys. This is a Tamiya DT-02. What I would say is a hobby grade toy. There are high-end race versions and other variations of this chassis, but this one right here, it uses about 2 or 3 different screw lengths. That way you don't mess things up. Fixed arms and links everywhere, barely any adjustments. One type of plastic used throughout the entire kit. Very easy to repair, very few parts. Very fun. This is definitely not a toy. I'll show you why as we get into it. So this is the Tamiya Bbx, a 2-wheel drive, kind of scale looking, what they call high performance race buggy. It definitely looks the part. The suspension is incredibly plush. And the way it's built is interesting. It's a flat chassis with a sandwiched roll cage. I wasn't sure how to do this video, so I figured I'll just go through the manual the way I built it, start from the beginning and get to the end. So they have you start off at the back with the gearbox. A really nice feature is right in here are 2 screws that you can remove to lift this hatch. Now these screws here, 1 and 2, both go into a captured metal nut. So your metal bolt is always going into a metal nut. So you're not wearing out any plastic here. Very smart. And then once you've done that, this lifts off, and so does this. Wait a second. Forgot I gotta take the roof panel off also. So once that's up, this all goes up, and you can reach here. 2 more screws. Let me pull this off so you guys can see more detail here. So wheel off, 1 screw, 2 screw. We now have the pinion exposed. You can also take the motor out if you want to. This is also the slipper clutch, which is an optional part that does not come with the car. It came with a standard fixed gear system, but I have a slipper clutch in here, which I feel if it's available, it's crucial because anytime you're landing jumps or putting shock to the transmission, this will take that grunt of the shock. So as I said, they have you start off with the rear gearbox, which is very easy to build. It's a 3-gear system held into the chassis by these 4 screws here. So if I took these 4 screws out, this whole system would just slide out. Typically, most companies have you adjust the slipper clutch here on this side. Well, this is all covered up nicely. Other companies usually put a hole right in the middle of their gear cover so you can adjust the slipper. To me, it was smart enough to put the slipper adjustment on this side. So you don't need to remove anything, and this slipper can be adjusted from the other side, and that keeps your gearing side a little more dust free. Inside the gear case is a ball differential, and that's easily adjusted by removing one of these drive shafts so you can adjust the screw. Removing a drive shaft involves removing one of these, but we'll get to that later. Tamiya gives you an 18-tooth pinion gear made up to a 86-tooth spur gear. It is 48-pitch gearing, and this is where you first start to notice already. Ball diff, 48-pitch gearing. I mean, the plastics already, as soon as you pull it out of the box, you can see the plastics are different. But 48 pitch and ball diff already denote that this is a higher end Tamiya kit. And then to complete the back, the manual tells you to build this sort of double wishbone looking section here, which are just trailing links. You don't actually deal with the trailing arms yet. We'll talk about that later. But they have you install these, which are on massive ball links, standard size turnbuckles, covered by a piece of plastic to make it look beefier, I guess. It's probably also going to help with bending. And it's real neat how they have you adjust this. Everything on this car is adjustable, and everything is easily adjustable except for one thing. We'll get to that one thing. Back here, you can adjust your camber and the rear toe by adjusting these links. If you'd like to adjust camber, you adjust only the top link. If you want to adjust your toe, you adjust both links equally together. And what that does is if you bring these links in, it'll bring the angle of this trailing arm in, giving you less toe. The buggy does come with a lot of rear toe and camber, which I'm guessing is needed being a rear drive vehicle. You know what, while we're back here, this trailing arm looks really beefy. a lot beefier than a typical double wishbone setup. So when we're taking load hits from this way or this way, this is much tougher than a double wishbone setup. And somebody asked me in the comments if it's bashable. Probably, but I don't think I'll be bashing mine. But it does look quite hefty, very robust. The only thing I feel is things are a lot more precise than a typical Tamiya. And you'll see that up front later on. So I'm not really sure I want to bash it and start loosening up all of my tolerances here. I'm gonna put this back together. 2 screws here, 1 screw up there, and then we're gonna move on to the front. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and take off the panel so you can get a closer look. And I didn't mention it earlier, but that's, I guess, the first thing that you notice is everything is hex hardware. Well, nearly everything is hex hardware, which is, again, only on Tamiya's higher end kits usually. So this top cover here comes off with Velcro. 1, 2, 3, 4 strips of Velcro on either side. And that exposes all of this here. I'm just gonna go ahead and remove this panel as well. 1, 2, 3, 4 screws. 2, 3, 4. We'll talk about the bodywork later. So now you see, we're moving into the front. They have you build the steering rack. And the steering rack is very typical of their TRF style cars. Hopefully you can see it. You've got turnbuckles, adjustable turnbuckles here at the front. You do have to use a low profile servo. And some nice features about the front. We've got metal balls inside of these ball joints. And the front end is actually fully adjustable. You can adjust caster by removing this shims in here. I'll show you right now. Shim pulled out. So the top arm will slide forward or backwards, and you can put shims in there to adjust whatever caster you'd like. Toe is adjusted by the turnbuckle links, obviously here. But here's that other tuning option that I mentioned was very strange. So everything's very easy to adjust and tune, but camber is weird. Hopefully I've got a clip that I'm gonna put up now. But these 2 shock tower pieces are separate, they're individual. And they get screwed onto the bulkhead in the front, into a block basically. You're screwing these onto a block. And before you screw them on, in the manual they ask you to put shims in there. So depending on how many shims you put in, and that's how you adjust it, that will control the angle of your shock tower, which also controls the position of these hinge pins, which goes in and out, which will change the camber of the front wheels. So camber and shock angle change at the same time using washers up here. But to do that, you've got to remove these captured hinge pins. They're captured hinge pins, by the way, very race-like. Top arm comes off, remove a shock, and that exposes the 2 screws in there. A very strange way to do camber, but it does ensure you have a very solid top link and a much more positive feeling front end. There's quite a bit of kick up on the front end. So even though most of the weight of this car is back here, giving it rear traction, that front end is probably going to be quite aggressive. Moving into the center section of the chassis, there seems to be just enough room for your speed control sitting on an angled plate and your receiver to fit inside a receiver box. So you do get a specific size receiver box. It should fit most receivers, but you've got to make sure your wires are coming out on this side as opposed to the front. So receiver box lays down, connection wires come out this side because there's actually a hump, if you can see, on that box there. And that's about all the room you have, because then the driver goes on top. I thought maybe I could fit a light kit in here, and I'm sure I could squeeze it, but with this tiny little bit of space here, it doesn't fit, and I don't care that much. I left the light kit out. Battery removal is very interesting, good. Body clip here, pull that out, this pin slides out. Your battery tray cover lifts up, and you slide a battery in here. Let me see if I got a battery. I do. Okay, so this is one of my thickest batteries. And it fits in here, no problem. I like the way this battery goes in and out. Staying in the middle of the car, the rear trailing arm, as you saw how beefy it was at the back earlier, it's just as nice up here because this metal ball screws into a captured lock nut inside the roll cage frame. And the roll cage section here, that where it holds the trailing arm, is actually reinforced. And it's in a pretty good location. I mean, what's stronger than triangles? That's what bridges are made of. Another thing is, when you're building this car, you're going to notice how many shims there are. A lot of aluminum, steel, metal shims. Shims all over the place to make everything that much more precise. So if you're going to build this, make sure you pay attention to where all the shims go, because there's a lot of them and a bunch of different sizes. The suspension is another thing I want to make a note about. Is they give you a parts tree that has a whole bunch of 2-hole pistons on them when you're building the shocks. Well, I didn't bother to see if there's any differences, and unfortunately there was differences, and I had built them wrong originally. They ask you to use a specific number. There's 3 different sizes. They're all 2-hole pistons, but the holes are just ever so slightly different sizes. And they ask you to use specific ones for front and specific ones for the rear, so pay attention to that. I like the way the shocks feel and the way they look. Tamiya asks you to drill a hole because these are aeration shocks. So you end up bleeding some of the fluid out and then pulling in some air, and you've got to have a precise amount in order to make it work the way they want. Well, that's not exactly easy to make exactly the way they want, because I don't even know what they want. You can't really explain to me what you want on paper. And I ended up having to rebuild them a couple of times. And I think that's it. One thing I didn't mention is the power system I decided to go with. I'm probably going to change it, I don't know. I originally was going to go with a 10.5 turn, but I feel like that might be a little bit too quick. We'll see. So I just went with a 27 turn modified stock, and I bumped the pinion gear from 18 to 26. So hopefully I'll see a big difference there. I went with a low profile SPT servo with a very fast transit time. You'll find a link to that in the description below. And that was it. The bodywork. When I got to the bodywork, it was difficult to cut out. They're very small chunks of tight, thick Lexan molds, and as you can see, very intricate shapes here. So cutting it out of the original mold was an experience. Not something I haven't done before, but not something I would say is super easy. I, as you can see, did not go box art. I went with a mustard yellow. That's what I call it, but it's actually Tamiya camel yellow paint, PS something. It turned out fantastic. It looks period correct if I'm looking at an older style buggy, which this really reminds me of. There are modern day buggies that look like this, but it really reminds me of an older buggy. The rear tires are nice and soft, supported by really big foams, you can see here. I think the foams are so big just to help with the sidewall flexing, to give it overall good support. Seems good. Front tires are hard, but that's a good thing. You don't want this thing oversteering and grabbing too hard. It's already got so much caster. That's probably going to be aggressive enough. I don't think we need sticky tires in the front. The body looks kind of semi-glossed, and that's because when I finished it, it was shiny and it looked really good, but it still looked like a Lexan body to me. So I thought maybe if I sprayed it with matte, flat clear, it would look better. So I brought it outside and I sprayed it with flat clear, and I wasn't happy. It looked like a plastic Radio Shack toy, which I love, I don't mind, but that's not what I wanted this to look like. So I just went with a semi-gloss and finished it up like that. But I think I would like the shiny back. So I'll probably do that maybe before I run, maybe. I don't know. Overall, this was a very good experience to build. The bottom of the chassis, I've got a lot of Tamiya chassis and none of them have extra recessed screws. Every single one of my off-road chassis has countersunk screws, but that still allows them to scrape along everything the chassis touches. So all of my screws on the chassis are usually scraped up and covered in dirt and filled up with dirt. But if you look here, they're recessed by an extra millimeter, 2 millimeters. And that's awesome to protect the screws. And just like a modern race buggy, you've got swept front arms. The material, like I can't start to explain what this material is. It's not typical Tamiya. I mean, if you're used to typical Tamiya's hobby grade toys. I don't know what else there is. Right, there is something else to say about this. The stickers. I did not put on exactly the stickers that Tamiya says. They ask you to put this sticker, this GR one, at the back here, or I put this blue sticker. This blue sticker, they don't even ask you to put anywhere, but I wanted it back here. This Tamiya sticker down here, they want it on the front of the buggy. I actually put a martini sticker on the front there. This Bilstein sticker, is my own sticker. This Hobby Wing sticker I added myself. They actually wanted you to put a giant BBX logo here. No way, Jose, not for me. I dropped the Firestone logo up here. I tried to make the rear end look really busy because I found when it was kind of empty, it just made the whole yellow body look really long, like a tunnel hull. So to shorten that look up a little bit, I filled the buggy up with heft. You know, stickers everywhere, hefty stickers. Another custom sticker is this Castrol sticker here. I've got a little tiny Becker signature sticker here. We've got Ray's Engineering here, Volk Racing over here. I think this looks great. Make sure you put the stickers in order as much as you can. If you're not new to Tamiya kits, you'll already know that. Another thing I didn't do was they asked you to cut out some of this body on both sides so you can mount little fake headlights here. I kind of like the way this looks. Also, they're kind of in a vulnerable spot if you flip the vehicle over. Speaking of flipping it over, I noticed that this top plate is sort of humped over the roll cage, which is really nice, which means when you flip this over, you're not going to be scratching up the cage right away, just that Lexan piece. I am a little indifferent about where these are mounted though. Fully exposed to damage right there. But man, does that look good. They also ask you to put 3 lights up here, and unless you want those gone as soon as you flip it or broken, I mean, they look pretty tough. And this whole thing is flexible, so you're probably not going to tear anything, I guess. But anyways, I don't want those lights there. I'm going to bring this out to a track, and I'm also going to bring this out for a bit of a blast, a soft bash, at a couple of locations I like to play at. Bear with me for the track video though. As some of you may know, my personal car is having its engine rebuilt, and now my wife's car is also in for some repairs. So we actually have no car for a small amount of time. Unless my daughter's not going to work, then I can take her car. I might do that. But let's get to why this is a great one-make race buggy. And that's another thing. A lot of people are gonna say, does it compare to modern race? You know what? Maybe it can if you're a really good driver, probably, I don't know. But that's not what Tamiya, I think, was aiming for. Tamiya wasn't aiming to be a leader on the racetracks. If you don't know, Tamiya does a lot of one-make races in Japan. Example, they released that TC-01, and people are like, well, that's not competitive with other touring cars and whatnot. But it doesn't matter, because TC-01s in Japan are racing other TC-01s. So in a one-make race, I can see how this is called a race buggy. Let me show you something. Hopefully you can see it. If not, I'm talking about it anyway. Tamiya usually does have the back of their manuals some information on tuning the vehicle you just built. But this one's got a full-out, fully adjustable platform here. Talking about toe, talking about caster and camber, showing you how to measure and change things. If you want to know, I went with a 26-tooth pinion gear, which gives me an 8.6 to 1 gear ratio. Stock 18-tooth pinion gives you a 12.42 to 1. Here's another reason why I think it's going to be in a one-make race series. At the back of the book, they have a setup sheet that you can photocopy or just fill in right here. And it goes through all the different changes: ground clearance, toe angles, rebound stroke, wheel hub and spacer, knuckle spacer. So knuckle spacer meaning the height of the knuckle in between the arms. You can change that for different geometry. That changes things like roll center. Damper type, piston hole size, or W part. That's what I was talking about, the W part. There's a 3, 4, and 5 on the tree, so W3, W4, W5. I just grabbed 3 and 4 and just randomly threw them into whatever shocks I grabbed. Then later realized that in the front they want W5, and in the rear they want W4. So if you like Tamiya, and you decided not to pick up this kit, I mean, I'm sure you had your reasons, but it is very different from all the other two-wheel drive buggies. It isn't the cheapest one, but honestly, it's not anywhere close to the most expensive. In Canada, it is hefty, I'll be honest. Very hefty. But I have seen people in the States picking up the whole kit plus the slipper clutch option up for about $250, $270. I haven't driven this yet, so I don't know. But it's making me feel pretty confident that even at the Canadian price, this will probably be worth it for me. I have never done a video format like this before, so I'm probably going to forget. So let me know if I missed something that you wanted to know about. and I'll cover it in the next video. I'll be doing some very low edit, raw footage run videos so you guys can really see what this is like without any camera tricks. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and if you did or didn't, hit the like or dislike button. And if you're not already subscribed, hit that button. It's free for you and helps out the channel tremendously. As always, thanks for joining me. Make it a great day. Peace out.